Welcome to A Distorted Lens, Israel and the Media. You should know the original title for the event was Israel and the Media, Is It Rigged? But we decided that with the political climate, we just weren't going to use that one. That was the only joke of the night. You don't have to worry. My name is Paul Warhit. This is my wife, Alyssa. We are here to give a brief introduction and a brief perspective on what JBS means to the community and to us as a family. So, JBS, Jewish Broadcasting Service, formerly known as Shalom TV, maybe the best kept secret in the Jewish world, but no more. JBS is a network committed to fair and balanced coverage on Israel and Middle East politics. It's focused on providing programming that digs down on Israeli politics and the goals of progressive Jews in Israel. It focuses on U.S.-Israel relations, on Israeli and Jewish culture, and the American Jewish community. That's a brief overview of the impact JBS has on our Westchester community. I'm going to ask Alyssa to speak briefly on the impact that JBS has on individual families.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alyssa Warhit, and I am JBS's #1 fan. I was first introduced to JBS by my friend Judy Schmeidler, sitting right here in the front, and for several years I enjoyed JBS's wonderful programs. But in July of 2014, JBS became an integral part of my life. My son Josh was serving in the Israeli Defense Forces as a combat soldier. He was sent into Gaza as part of Operation Protective Edge. JBS provided me with unbiased reporting. Most importantly, the station provided me with comfort and a psychological lifeline. I will forever be in debt to JBS for getting me through this difficult time. Now my mission is to pay it forward by sharing with my community the wonderful work that JBS does. I thank you all for coming out tonight.
On that note, I would like to invite to the bima the president and CEO of JBS and a giant among the Jewish community, Rabbi Mark Golub.
We call this media bias, and there are a couple places I want to go. And Shahar, as an Israeli yourself, as someone who was in the consulate during the 2014 Gaza war, to what extent do you believe, accurate to say there is media bias against Israel in the mainstream general media? To what extent is it a function of either Jewish paranoia or hypersensitivity?
I think, well, first of all, let me just say that it's a true pleasure to be here tonight and especially share the stage with the incredible Professor Thane Rosenbaum and Rabbi Golub, really, and thank you. Thank you to all of you. That is a great commitment for Israel and for the Jewish people to be here. I want to relate to what you just said, and you discussed media bias, and I think it's enough to watch some of the major news shows or even the semi-news shows. If you think about the entertainment, the lighter, the millennial shows, if it's the Colbert Report or others, and you understand that there is a certain perception that is embedded in the reporting of Israel, perception that is echoed not only in Jewish paranoia, as the saying goes, the fact that you're a paranoid doesn't mean nobody chases you. But the fact is that the not advocacy organizations, but I want to mention journalists who called out media bias. People like Richard Behar of Forbes magazine, who established the Mid-East Dig, which looks into reporting of various outlets from the New York Times to AP and others, Matt Friedman, other people who called out straightforward media bias against Israel. And don't look far. Look into the Foreign News Association in Israel that called out what was happening in Gaza in the course of 2014 and their lack of ability to report credibly about what was happening. So it's clear, cut, and simple. Let there be no confusion. Israel faces an uphill battle when it comes to media reporting, especially in times of conflict.
Thane?
Well, I too want to echo the sentiment about Shahar. When he was in the council's office in New York, as you heard here tonight at this program and at the synagogue, he is a very powerful voice on behalf of Israel. And it was very resonant and loud and meaningful when he spoke. And this, he is the very best of what Israel produces, and I'm really honored to be sitting with him today. Look, Israel is, from which the media is liberal. It always has been. It's part of a progressive agenda. Israel is a terrible story. The success of Israel is just not interesting. Everything that Israel does, all of its achievements, all of its glories, the way it saves the world during crises, its technology, its innovations in medicine, everyone wonders, how come this isn't on the cover of Time magazine? How come all these new pills that Israel produces, how come you couldn't use a telephone in this country, a cell phone, if it wasn't for Israeli innovation? How come no one wants to know about that? Well, because no one wants to report on it. And the reason they don't want to report on it, it's just it's not interesting. It's not a fashionable story. And the reason it's not fashionable, you could say, well, it's a historic, anti-Semitism. Look, the world has always had problems with Jews. That has never changed, and it's not changing now. And Jewish success is very hard for people to accept. And that is just a fact. And no one wants to be honest about Jewish success, a robust, vital democracy in a sea of theocracies, autocracies, where there's beheadings and stonings and dismemberments and lashings and the torching of homosexuals and throwing them off of buildings, and Israel is the human rights violator. How is that possible? It can only be possible if no one is interested in telling Israel's story. We're living in a dangerously anti-colonial period. What I mean by that is, and by the way, President Obama has very much promoted a very strong anti-colonial bent, which is, Western powers have subjected brown-skinned people, other-skinned people, to terrible things, to terrible indignities. They are the colonialists, and that's the story.
Is that true?
Historically was partially true in certain places, of course, and the United States clearly is on the forefront of that with the years we've had of slavery. But the reality is that what you're seeing is a romanticism with the Palestinian story. So much so that nothing is ever asked of Palestinians. No one ever asks them to do anything. And they're never ever subjected to any moral scrutiny for anything that they do. It's for all the deprivations of it must be to live in Gaza, it must be great to be a Palestinian because it's infantilizing. It really is. It's like what we do to children. We say everything that they do is reactive to Israel. They have no impulse control. They couldn't possibly not stab people. They have to stab people. We wouldn't accept that for Finnish people, Icelandic people, French. No people on the planet would be our children. Thank you. That's why I said infantilize. You don't let your kid say, he can't take it, he has to have gum, he has to chew. Nobody talks like this. It's only with respect to Palestinians, and because it's all about an anti-colonial Western white person's prejudice, privilege, that we never really subject the other side. We cover them in a human rights agenda. And because of the irony is we cover Palestinians in a human rights agenda, and we never ask or subject them to the scrutiny of their own human rights violations. We never ask that question because they are fantastic abusers of human rights. But nobody wants to talk about it. So again, yes, it's clear, and what Shahar is saying, what Mark is saying is, but there are reasons for this. And let me just say, Israel could have made itself a lot easier if it spent the rest of its life just dealing with oranges and avocados. If they had just been the Israel of the 1960s, I think the world would have taken less notice. But I think the audacity of this little country to be subjected to wars, and terrorism, and Nobel Prizes and innovations in technology, I just think it's too much.
The honest manifestation of that equation happened to me several times when, one morning when I really woke up with energy to do my job, and I found out that there was another great Israeli invention, medical or other, and I run to a relevant outlet, and sometimes, or most of the times, they'll tell me, no interest, no story. But one time or twice, I actually had the ability to have an honest conversation where the journalist said, this is incredible, only I can't print this. I said, why can't you print this? I said, because I don't agree with Israel. I said, don't agree with what? I said, the evil colonial regime that Israel is part of. So I can't print this. But what does diabetes have to do with this?
Mm-hmm. By the way, as wonderful as Israel's technological contributions have been to the world, to me, that's not the greatness of Israel. It's not about a cell phone for me. It's about Israel setting up a hospital on the Israeli side of the Syrian border and taking care of the wounded in Syria, and nobody talks about it.
Or rescue missions around the world after natural disaster.
Exactly.
Nobody's interested in
that. What is always upsetting is that when Mahmoud Abbas's mother is cared for in an Israeli hospital because she's got serious cancer, and Israelis don't care that it's Mahmoud Abbas's mother. That's a story to me. When they're American Jews who do not understand that Arab Israelis have the right to vote. Arab Israelis not only have the right to vote, there have been and there is today an Arab Israeli as a Supreme Court member.
Who refused to sing Hatikva with the rest of his brethren, and no one bothered him.
Yes, and by the way,
it's okay to do that. It's called a free society.
Yes, and this is the Supreme Court justice who sentenced an Israeli president to jail for sexual misconduct, and it's the same Arab Israeli Supreme Court justice who was in charge of the recent elections last March. This is who Israel is.
But Mark, it's nothing new. And people forget that because part of that is Golda's balcony, that when people think about Golda Meir, it's only in the context of the Yom Kippur War. When we remember that when Israel was only 8, it was Golda Meir who declared that it's Israel's obligation to reach out to the newly decolonizing nations of Africa and help create and build and nurture a new world. A female leader of the mid-50s who was thinking in terms that impacted my work as a diplomat 60 years later when I arrived in East Africa. And that sentiment did not win her a Nobel Peace Prize, nor did it win her any other recognition. But this represented a long-term strategic diplomacy that is an echo of the heart of a nation that still very much is tangible today in the Israeli work.
Hold on. I want to play here the devil's advocate.
Yep.
If there were someone here on the more liberal or left side of the community, they would have said to you, Thane, it is true, a lot of what you say is true, but what I haven't heard you say is, you haven't referred to the instances in which the state of Israel has used its power inappropriately, is in some way brutalizing Palestinians, that Israeli soldiers still patrol not only parts of the West Bank where Israelis live, but if necessary, they'll go into into Arab communities looking for terrorists, and they'll wake people up in the middle of the night, and Israel will still bulldoze a house. And what you're not recognizing, someone would say to you, is that for all the correct things you say, we didn't hear you say that you were holding Israel responsible for anything which the Palestinians claim they are being subjected to. And what would you say first?
This is a free and open society. First of all, people like Shahar never in their diplomatic position fail to say Israel is not a perfect society. They always start off with that. Ask me, show me one Arab society that says that. Never, never. So it's not like Israel sits there and says we are perfect. He said we are completely imperfect. That's what a democracy is. It's messy. Lots of things are going on. Lots of competing, conflicting things are going on. And yes, there has been tragic loss of life among Palestinians. But when Mark said, whoever this person, one liberal talking to another liberal, would say, you didn't recognize, the first thing I would say is, yes, and neither the Palestinians nor the Arab world has really recognized Israel as a neighbor. And it's very hard to take another society, another country seriously. And I talk about this in my human rights classes all the time, that we have underplayed this denial of the right to exist. This thing has become so casual. It is serious. It is a serious problem. You wouldn't talk to your neighbor who said, I don't recognize you as my neighbor. I don't recognize you as living on my block. I don't want you on my block. You don't sit down and negotiate peace treaties with them because they've already sent a message of utter contempt and disrespect that they deny the very moral foundations and integrity of who you are. So yes, Israel has definitely, in its pursuit of defending itself against terrorism, against Arab animus from around the world, a lot of Arab loss has taken place. But what we've also not confronted is the sheer unwillingness on at least the Palestinian side to meaningfully engage in the kind of nation-building discussions that are necessary to have another state. And what you saw in Gaza is just perfectly emblematic of that. And if Gaza is the template for what the West Bank would look like, I think that's the question. It's not just the greenhouse, it's beyond the greenhouses. It's the way in which an entire society has sacrificed its own children, martyring children. There is, a number of years ago, Marty Lipton from the New Republic, Marty Parrott, sorry, from the New Republic was roundly criticized for saying that Arab life is cheap in the Arab world. And he was roundly criticized. And I remember calling him up the next day and saying, you don't have to apologize for that. That is demonstrably true. It's demonstrably true. It's not saying you don't think there's Arab value. We all want there to be value to Arab lives. The Arabs themselves are not showing that they recognize that there's value to their own lives. And it's not just about martyring their own children, it's their sacrificing of generations. I don't walk around with a keychain around my neck for a house in Poland that my parents had. And I haven't sat there and just refused to move and say, that olive tree, not that olive tree, can only be this olive. Who talks like that? Like, no sense of you have to begin a process of normalizing your lives. You cannot spend an eternity, and they're comfortable in living in refugee villages, living and spending time saying, we want from the river to the sea. To me, the minute you hear river to the sea, you just give them the back of the hand, because river to the sea means Jewish genocide. That's what it means.
I was going to let you respond, but we only have a little bit of time left.
So I'll just say a quick word.
Only a quick
1917, centennial, the Balfour Declaration. A couple of weeks ago, Palestinian Foreign Ministry announced as a global campaign to demand the United Kingdom a clear apology for, and this is a quote, giving the Jews what they do not deserve. That is a lack of recognition of the core of what Israel is to the Jewish people, and that pertains to the very possibility of being able to reach some sort of a settlement with a people who is unwilling to recognize the very existence of our heritage, our tradition, and our being as a nation.
Thank you. One last issue. You both have been very outspoken against BDS, a movement of boycotts, divestment, and sanctions meant to simply undermine the entire state of Israel. And I believe in some way the BDS movement is really an attempt to eliminate the state of Israel. And there's concern that BDS is more rampant on university campuses than anywhere else. Both of you deal with this. You deal with it, Shahar, through Stand With Us. You're on a university campus. I want you to speak very simply and directly. To what extent is BDS, I ask the same kind of question now, to what extent are you concerned that BDS has traction in the larger community on campus? To what extent is BDS a problem which should concern us, but again, there's a degree of Jewish hysteria that is inappropriate.
On a panel at Columbia University, I was told by a professor, again, that was a pro-professor with a pro-group of students, pro-Israel, and he said, Shahar, you're a great guy, but you're only using BDS to get money. Because look at how many colleges you have all around the US. How many BDS resolutions were accepted against Israel? A few dozens, maybe. How many of them have been implemented, he asks me. I said 0. So he said, you're right. So this is why you're just hyping up the problem to inflate a Jewish community, your existence, your salary, your organization's existence, because there isn't a problem. And I beg to differ for a very simple reason. Yes, you are correct. There hasn't been any implementation of a BDS resolution against Israel for the rule of common sense, thank goodness. But we also know what the real risk of BDS is. BDS targets not the 10% who are pro-Israel or the 10% who are anti-Israel. It targets the 80% who have no idea about Israel. And it spreads seeds of poison that will grow not in the next 2 to 3 years, but in the next 10, 15, and 20 years. So that the opinion leaders of the society of the United States of America who will sit at court or go to Congress will always have in the back of their mind, it doesn't have to be full frontal, thinking about it all the time, that there is something negative about Israel. That when they went to college, they knew that Israel was malicious, that I shouldn't touch Israel because there is something nasty about Israel. And this, to me, represents the clear danger that the boycott, divest, and sanction movement is, to which, by the way, Thane, they don't care about Arab lives in the Arab world. They don't care about atrocious human rights violations. They wouldn't even look at it, for in their eyes, for lack of information, ignorance, and to take what Malcolm said on the video, the deep down indifference. To them, we are the epitome of evil.
I mean, that was so wonderfully said. It's hard to add to that. I mean, the first question you asked before, really, Shahar is mentioning again, that's the double standard that Israel is subjected to. You say to a liberal person, okay, Israel is not a perfect society, but why are you holding it to a standard that you aren't holding to any other Western democracy, or more particularly, the other nations that inhabit the Middle East? You're not interested in any of that at all. You're only interested in demonizing and delegitimizing Israel. And that hypocrisy, that paradox, is the most glaring statement of an anti-Semitism, an underlying anti-Semitism. Why only Israel? Yes, but you know what Shahar said about the poisoning and the contaminating is true, and it's unpleasant to be on a campus.
If a Jewish organization wants to host a BDS speaker, is that appropriate or inappropriate?
It's inappropriate.
What about free speech?
Well, look, it's not a matter of should they host it or not host it. The problem is that this is an avowedly genocidal idea, right?
BDS?
Yeah, I mean, its whole purpose is to squeeze Israel out of existence. It's to do to Israel, to turn it into South Africa. So the question is, would you allow any anti-human rights violator to come on campus? Because I think, to me, to say that you're in favor of BDS is to say you're interested in eliminating the state of Israel as a Jewish homeland and to kill all of Jews that happen to be there.
They don't say kill
But
Jews.
that's its effect. Its effect. It has no other way to work, right? They're not asking for a two-state solution, Mark.
No, they're not.
Right. So if they're not asking for a two-state solution and they're looking for a one-state solution, what's going to happen to those Jews in Israel?
I'm not sure those who believe that BDS has a just cause also want to kill Jews. But I do think they want to kill Israel.
I just don't know how you can.
What?
To me, it's a very clever way
Okay.
to say I want to kill Jews by saying I just want to kill Israel.
How do you, as both an Israeli and as someone who's working in this field, feel when a Jewish organization, sometimes a national Jewish organization, would have as a featured speaker a leader of BDS?
Not only in the field of BDS, because BDS is just one component of a great work that we have to ambassadorize Israel and the people. But how do I feel as an Israeli? I'll tell you. What brought me to this position is the understanding that if the Almighty gave me some sort of capability to utter the feelings of the people of the state of Israel, beyond any governmental issue, I want to be there for Yossi from Beersheba and for Hanan from Tel Aviv. when they live every day in an impossible reality and beat it to become one of the most incredible nations on earth. As you said, modern day miracle. I want to be able to be here for them, to voice their feelings and concerns, to share their love for Israel, but their misunderstanding and complete confusion in the face of what we're seeing out there, which is complete and utter blindness as to Israeli reality.
Neither of you answered my question. I want to know what you feel about Jewish organizations that invite spokesmen of BDS to their national convention.
I would say, this is what I would say to those organizations, and I would say the same thing that I would say to universities. Forget the killing of Jews. Forget the fact that they don't want a state of Israel. If you are promoting a BDS speaker, if this is the person you've brought to your organization for a keynote address, or you brought them to a university, at least acknowledge that this organization, these people believe in stoning women, lashing women, torching homosexuals, beheading journalists, killing non-believers. That's what the BDS, that's what you're supporting. If you're okay with that, if you in essence think that's who should be at my university, because you wouldn't say that if you found any organizations that, well, I believe in killing Africans or Asians. Somehow BDS gets a pass. The Palestinians get a pass. And the question is, why? They don't strike me as any more special than any other people in the world. They're not better looking, they're not smarter. Why do they get this pass? Because the BDS movement, what stands behind that is the Muslim Brotherhood, and what stands behind that is 75% of those people from around the world. That's 75%, and the Pew studies show this, 65 to 75% of Muslims around the world believe in a strict adherence to Sharia law. That's what you get. And so when Bill Maher says that on HBO, you should be defending Bill Maher or Ayaan Hirsi Ali. That's the truth. That's what no one wants to admit. Yes, there's 1.5 billion Muslims in the world, but 800 or 900 million of them believe in stoning. That's the problem. And if you're supporting a BDS speaker, that's what you're behind. And we should openly declare so that there's no hiding, no pretending. That's who they are. If you still feel strongly about boycotting Israel, you go, girl. But let's know at least that you can't wrap the BDS speaker about human rights. Human rights is not their agenda.
By the way, you understand why I love these guys. I just love them to death. One more round of applause for these two fabulous people, and thank you.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.